Monster Hunter has a mechanic that I don't think most players truly appreciate. However, it's a double-edged sword, as while it can add a new dimension to this series' already stellar combat, if it's not used correctly, it can totally break the game. Old World Rathalos is one of the most annoying hunts in the series. There's this constant wind pressure that'll stun you, a roar that'll lead directly into a fireball, and of course the monster lives up to its title as King of the Skies by absolutely refusing to touch the ground. Once you've done a bit of research and testing though, you'll quickly find that these abilities can be turned against the Rathalos and used to your advantage with a bit of clever planning. You see, with earplugs you can ignore the roar and land a free hit when he tries to do his combo. With wind resistance you no longer have to worry about getting pushed around by these enormous wings all the time, and with enough flash bombs, all flying will do for Rathalos is open him up to a free knockdown. All of these together completely changed the hunt from what was once an annoying game of cat and mouse where the mouse could both fly and shoot fireballs, to a satisfying beatdown where you're constantly countering everything the monster can throw at you thanks to your ability to plan around his strengths and exploit his weaknesses. This is just a glimpse at why preparation in Monster Hunter is so special, and it goes so much deeper than just Old World Rathalos. So let's explore this mechanic, see how it can vastly improve the games, and how it can accidentally break them. Val-Hazak was one of my favorite Elder Dragons in Monster Hunter World. Not only did I love his design and especially his weapons, but his arc-tempered form introduced something that forced me to remember that old mechanic that I had pretty much ignored until running into him. This smoke right here is called Effluvium. Normal Val has it as well, but the arc-tempered version's Effluvium is much stronger. If you stand in it, your health will gradually drain, and if you remain for too long, your max health will be cut in half. While you can bring your max health back with a Nullberry, you won't recover it. This really isn't something that you can just ignore and fight through. Even if you were good enough to dodge every single hit when your health was cut in half, you'd still quickly succumb to the gradual drain, primarily due to the fact that the entire area is totally covered in this stuff. Unless of course you're a veteran of the series and you're just built different like me. I personally just ran in and simply outskilled the... Didn't take me long to realize that I wasn't built different. I wasn't going to be able to beat this boss without a bit of scheming, so that's exactly what I did. I knew there had to be some Effluvium resistant skills somewhere, so I sorted through my collection of decorations, found a strange button along the way, located Effluvium resistance, tossed it into my current set, and just like that, I didn't have to worry about it anymore. Similar to Rathalos, this once deadly ability of the monster was completely trivialized thanks to my planning. This is, however, an extremely simple version of the mechanic, perhaps even more so than Rathalos. I really can't stress how easy this was to do. I already had the decorations since they're just common random drops, and they're small enough that you only need a few 1 slots to get the full effect. Even if I was somehow profoundly unlucky and didn't have any of the decorations, I could just make a talisman that would have given me resistance for free. Furthermore, it's just one skill that, once obtained, acts as a passive that ignores the boss's strongest attribute. This is just a little too passive to really be an exciting bit of preparation, so while it does ask you to prepare, it doesn't feel that satisfying. You're not creating a plan and executing it as much as you're going, oh hey, this boss uses paper, I'll bring scissors. So how about we turn up the dial a little more and see what happens. Furious Rajang is terrifying. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or simply isn't human. Switch Axe is my favorite weapon, and I've been using it on and off since 4 Ultimate. I'm very used to just out-aggroing the monster with this weapon's overwhelming offense, but every once in a while I'm forced to take a step back and rethink my hyper-aggressive approach. Furious Rajang was one of those times. This was the first time I triple carded in Iceborne, and it was not even close. I distinctly remember thinking that with my current set and equipment, I was not going to beat this thing in a reasonable amount of time. It wasn't even a matter of defense either. Granted, I wouldn't say no to more defense, but I was more worried about just not knowing when, or quite frankly how, I was supposed to avoid his overwhelming assault, let alone actually land my own hits. He was just so quick and his attacks were unrelenting. He would swing back and forth a few times, then just when I'd go into counter, he would sidestep and follow up with a quick jab into a charge. At this point, I'd assume I must have an opening, only for him to instantly turn around and try to end my whole career with a haymaker. So when I got back to HQ, I went to the drawing board and began to cook up something diabolical. I knew exactly how to beat him. I'd use Furious Rajang's offense and speed against him. The first part of this plan was this skill right here. I usually don't like evasion since it feels rather unreliable to me unless you're using the higher levels, which are just too expensive. More than anything though, my reflexes just aren't quick enough to dodge through stuff consistently. In short, I'm bad at the game. However, here it would be perfect. All these attacks from Rajang are extremely fast, and as a result, so are the hitboxes. This means that dodging through them will be a fair bit easier than most normal attacks. Next, I used Evade Extender. This, in conjunction with Evade Up, would basically give me Kingdom Hearts rolls, which I figured was fair considering this thing was moving like it was a boss from Birth by Sleep. Finally, I used a bit of an unorthodox pick, Marathon Runner. Look, can I just level with you for a second? This thing scared me. I wanted to be able to run if I had to. Can you really blame me for that? Anyway, with the plan in mind, I went back and it worked perfectly. I didn't even card a single time. The reason this was so different from Val wasn't just the use of multiple skills. Of course, that was part of it, as now I couldn't just slot in the skills I needed. I actually had to change up my armor and plan out a set that would work perfectly with the skills I wanted to use. It goes a bit further though. Not only did I have to make a strategy and set before the hunt, but I actually had to execute a different game plan during the hunt. Remember, with Val I just threw on effluvium resistance and fought in the exact same way as I did before. That wasn't going to work here. Now that I had these evasive skills, I had to think about which attacks I could evade through, where my new openings were, when I should press the subscribe button, and how to best utilize the different abilities that I gave myself. This is where we reach the peak of preparation. Consider this. What if I had decided to be a tank instead? Imagine an alternate timeline where instead of evading, I thought to use skills like defense up, stun resistance, and health up. If I did that, once again, I'd have to totally alter my playstyle. Maybe I'd even bring different items like mega armor skin to increase my defense even further, smoke bombs to create clouds to heal up in, or flash bombs to prevent the monster from being able to target me as much. Now consider the fact that this isn't some imaginary timeline, it's something that at least one person watching this video right now actually did. This is the magic of preparation. This is what makes it so special. Because of the near endless options available to you, you can really experiment and get creative with how you want to solve the problems the game is throwing at you. I absolutely love that you can lose to a monster, then rummage through this chest of endless items and scroll down your list of potential skills to craft a strategy that's not just perfect for countering the monster, but perfect for you as well. It truly allows you to express yourself and demonstrate your... Wait, is that supposed to go that high? Alatreon is one of the best bad bosses I've ever seen. It makes me wonder how a fight so fine-tuned and meticulously well-crafted could include such baffling design choices. Much like how Alatreon can switch between two opposite elements on a whim, so too do my feelings on this fight. I want to start with the positive. I'm not sure there's another fight in this series that quite captures Monster Hunter as well as this one does. Here's what I mean. To me, Monster Hunter is a turn-based video game. I know that might seem weird considering it's so clearly not, but hear me out. The best fights in the series for me are those back and forth engagements where both parties are perfectly responding to the actions of the opposition. It's a large part of why I prefer to play these games solo at least once before I try out multiplayer. I adore that back and forth, and it's a large reason why I fell in love with the series in the first place. Now, to fully understand this idea, we need an example from both the monster and the hunter. We'll start with that first one. Brachydios is a challenging monster. He always has been. His constant explosions, the high damage from blast blight, and of course, the speed and precision of a prime mat Wii boxing. If you try to just run in without thinking, you'll almost certainly lose the fight. You really can't win without playing his game. But it's not an unfair game by any means. Yes, his explosions are massive, but they're also telegraphed. Right when he does this slam into the ground, you can actually see where the explosion will pop up. Equally, they travel in a predictable and logical way that perfectly flows with where Brachy was already going. Think about this. He charges forward in a straight line, he then slams down his head, and the explosions go forward in, you guessed it, a straight line. So despite how quick this attack is, and despite the fact that he'll do it twice in a row sometimes, it never feels unfair. A deeper look at this fight reveals something even better though. You see, Brachy gives you the chance to counter his overwhelming aggression with your own. The openings here are pretty short, but there are openings, and their frequency is what makes this hunt so much fun. You're constantly going in for these little jabs here and there every time you get the chance, while perfectly maneuvering around this monster's flurry of explosive attacks. However, this system wouldn't work at all if the hunter wasn't designed in a certain way as well. The weapons of Monster Hunter are all about commitment. When you attack in these games, you're pretty much locked in, especially if you use one of the larger attacks. This is extremely important as it forces the hunter to think about when the best time to attack will be and how they should do it when that opening presents itself. Finally, it's here that the turn-based style really shines through. Because you, the hunter, are forced to think about your heavily committal actions and forced to exploit these openings that the monsters have, you get this system where you recognize these openings and realize when you can play offensively versus defensively. In other words, you understand when it's your turn and when it's the monster's. Circling back to Alatreon, I honestly struggle to think of another monster that demonstrates this system as well as it does. The hitboxes here are genuinely outstanding. They're all so precise and exactly where they should be. I mean, you can literally roll under its claw swipe. No, not through, under. The hitbox is so fine-tuned that the small change in height from standing to rolling results in you dodging the attack. This absurd precision exists basically everywhere in this fight, and it leads to that turn-based style that I love so much. The beam of fire that you can sidestep and instantly punish, these explosions that if you roll at just the right moment you can sneak past and get some free hits in, these chains of lightning that seem impossible to avoid at first but quickly become something you want the dragon to use because you know how simple it is to counter and how much damage you can get in when you do. To make things even better, the monster is never so aggressive that you just have to sit around and wait for it to finish freaking out. Both your turn and the monster's are equal in length, so it ends up feeling like this truly exciting and perhaps most importantly, balanced back and forth encounter. The whole thing is just so well refined and wait, what is it doing? Oh, that's right, it's ruining the hunt. So while I do think Eschaton is a problem, I don't think the solution is to remove it. I think they should actually add something even stronger. I promise this will make sense, just let me explain. So this is what happens when preparation is increased to its highest possible degree. This is a boss that you can't beat without preparing for it in the way the developers intended. I'm sorry, you're totally right. I should account for every single technicality in 1 in a million case. This is a hunt that the overwhelming majority of players will not be able to beat in a reasonable amount of time without a profoundly specific unorthodox setup that effectively equates to an extremely difficult challenge run that'll take dozens or even hundreds of hours of practice on this single monster. Do you see why people don't talk like this? Anyway, this is a boss that you can't beat without preparing for it in the way the developers intended. And that's a good thing, right? Alatreon has this attack called Eschaton Judgment and a mechanic that lets it switch elements. Eschaton will one-shot you if you don't deal enough elemental damage with the opposite element, or just dragon if you're really good. The elemental switch will change it to that opposite element if you don't break its horns while it's in dragon mode. This means that if you fail to break the horns while it's in fire and you're using ice, it'll switch to ice, your element won't work anymore, and you'll cart to the eventual full power Eschaton. Equally, if you just don't deal enough elemental damage in the first place, even if you do break the horns, Eschaton will still take you out. The only way you can beat this boss is by stopping the full power Eschaton with a ton of elemental damage, then breaking the horns to stop the switch. Seems simple enough. You prep for the fight by bringing elemental weapons and skills like element up and element crit, you change the way you hunt to a more aggressive style, and your preparation pays off when you beat the monster. That's all true, but there's a fatal flaw here. There is no other way to beat the monster. You must use the corresponding element, you must break the horns, you must play aggressively and meet the DPS check. This combination turns into a lock and key system where there's only one solution. It effectively removes the expression and creativity that preparation has the potential to demonstrate. Remember how there were multiple ways to beat Furious Rajang? That's not the case here. Eschaton is the problem and offense is the only solution. Funny enough, that's totally fine for me personally. I love playing aggressively, that's why I use Switch Axe. Element also isn't a problem considering I like building sets to counter specific monsters. I genuinely enjoyed the process of meticulously planning and gradually crafting this perfect set to accomplish this specific goal. That goal just so happened to align with my playstyle, but what if it didn't? Sure, I like Alatreon, but this may come as a shock to you. Other people play Monster Hunter too. What about the people who want to play passively? What about the ones who like to focus on survival, to really take advantage of the fact that you have nearly an hour to beat most of these hunts? Those are valid strategies for the entire game, but not for Alatreon. The problem is not that you're forced to prepare for this fight. It's a super boss. It should be hard. You should have to prepare for it, but that preparation should come from your personal plan, not a schematic that someone else made for you. So right now we're focusing on Eschaton, but if you zoom out, the vast majority of this hunt is fine, good even. We've already gone over why, but I think that's exactly how you solve this problem of restrictive preparation. Hear me out. What if instead of just removing Eschaton and keeping the rest of the hunt the same, we replaced Eschaton with a new phase? This new phase would be less like Fatalis, where the attacks just get stronger and the phase can't be avoided, and more like an optional bonus phase that you don't have to deal with if you use element. This phase would only use dragon element. It would be significantly faster, attacks would hit harder, and Alatreon would be far more aggressive with smaller openings and cooldowns. Finally, and most importantly, this phase would only last around 90 seconds. It would work the same way Eschaton does, but instead of weakening it, using element would stop the phase altogether. All other mechanics of the fight, like the horn breaks, the elemental switching, and the prevention of farcasters would remain the same. There are two main reasons why this works for Alatreon specifically. First, replacing Eschaton with this new phase would no longer result in the player automatically losing the fight. You may think, well sure, but they'd still have to face face a nearly unstoppable Alatreon for 90 seconds. They're probably gonna die anyway, so what's the difference? And that's a valid concern, but this is why I say it works specifically for Alatreon. Remember how before I said all of Alatreon's hitboxes are extremely fine-tuned, telegraphed, and precise? That would remain the case here. Sure, it'd attack faster and probably get some new moves, but those fundamental priorities would remain unchanged. The new phase is still a punishment for failing to meet the elemental check, but crucially, instead of being a punishment that kills you no matter what, it becomes something that, with enough skill, planning, and practice, you can overcome. The second reason this works so great goes back to that preparation and player choice. You can decide to play more defensively and just tank out this new phase. The dragon element is especially important here because of that. It gives you the chance to prepare for this phase specifically by building an almost anti-dragon set with as much dragon resistance as you can get. Maybe you're so confident in this defense that you just focus purely on survival for those 90 seconds. Maybe you want to use evasion and take advantage of this new speed just like with Furious Rajang and play an almost counter-heavy style, constantly dodging and getting in smaller hits when you can. Or maybe you're crazy enough to believe that you can just brute force it and somehow out-aggro what is effectively a flying Furious Rajang. Of course, you could also just go hyper-aggressive with elements and avoid this phase entirely. The key here is that now you actually get to choose your own path. With this change, you can creatively conjure up a solution to the problems that you face. But that's just my solution. How would you change the Alatreon fight? Assuming you would change it at all, that is. Speaking of Alatreon, I would have never fought this boss if I didn't do something different. Something that totally reinvented Monster Hunter World for me. Check out this video on that.